Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, over the course of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there have been many unwitting victims. Not simply the poor Ukrainians who are being bombed and shelled into oblivion by the oppressive Russian forces, but also the Russian people and the American people and the British people and the Japanese people and the people of every single country that has sanctioned Russia and every country that hasn't sanctioned Russia. Because in our modern era, the economies of all countries are connected on an international scale. And what one major producer does, what one major exporter does, affects everybody. So in a sense, all of us, my friends, unless you do not live on this planet, are unwitting victims of these sanctions. And I shall explain my meaning in a moment. But what I'm particularly focused on right now is the plight of the Russian people. My friends, ever since Putin launched his invasion on February 24th, numerous countries, including the United States, have led in a rash of sanctions against Russia. For example, the United States on February 27th, along with the EU, banned Russian banks from accessing the global SWIFT international payment system, which is a major transactional mediator which banks use to do things with each other. They have been shut out from that. On February 28th, the United States, the EU, and Canada announced travel bans and asset freezes on wealthy individuals and did more targeted stuff. But then we go all the way up to only a few days ago, and this happened famously, as Joe Biden announced it, the United States banned Russian oil imports and other energy imports from Russia as well. And then quite recently, the EU suspended the ability to travel. The EU, Canada, and the US suspended the ability for Russian aircrafts to travel in Canadian, American, Russian, South Korean, or Japanese airspace. So effectively, the Russian people are frozen out of a good majority of the world simply because of the actions of their president. Now, of course, the private industry, some of them spurred by sanctions, other of them spurred by their false sense of virtue, have also proceeded to do punitive actions against the Russian people as well. McDonald's has pulled out. Sony has pulled out. Has stopped putting shipments in Russia, as has Nintendo. I mean, Disney will not be screening their movies there. I mean, it goes on and on. There's just an innumerable list of companies, investment firms like Goldman Sachs, Citibank, which was the only major U.S. bank to be in Russia, has also began to cease its operations. There's so many big, mediums through which life is conducted every day. Restaurants, theaters, banks, firms have all pulled back, all under the justification of punishing Putin's aggressive war. In their words, his war of aggression, so to speak. Now, my friends, something goes without saying. The reason this is happening, and the reason you can get away with this kind of nonsense on an international scale, is primarily one reason. Because geopolitics, when geopolitical conversations happen, people are rarely mentioned. Nations are mentioned. What do I mean? Look at any headline that describes the Russian effort in Ukraine, the Russian invasion in Ukraine. It'll say, Russia did this today. Russia did that. Russia did that. Russia does that. Russia did this to these people. Russia did this. And when you presume that Russia is doing all these things without making any distinctions or clinging to actual reality, the actual people who are doing these things, what happens? You can quite easily justify atrocity against an entire people. The problem is, my friends, when we talk about international politics, whether it was with Russia or China, so many of us speak in what is called abstraction. We speak in these broad, general terms that have no grounding in reality. We are imprecise, so to speak, and our imprecision threatens meaning and allows people with bad intentions or people with good intentions to do bad things by exploiting the holes in that imprecision, by filling in the gaps where we did not do so by being precise. So when we say that China is moving on Taiwan, do we mean all the 1 billion plus people who reside in China? Of course not. It'd be absurd, right? But that's how it's presented. The Chinese people are grouped in with the Politburo and Xi Jinping, all of whom are only a few hundred folks. My friends, our imprecision and our treatment as nations as abstractions precisely provides the foundation for this kind of behavior to happen. People are saying that the Russian people are being dehumanized. Well, from my perspective, my friends, they were not humanized in the first place because they were treated as a part of this collective nation and they were given no identity of their own by the people who are on the international stage. So forget dehumanization, because dehumanization suggests that they were once humanized and now that's being taken away, but we never connected the process because so many of us have a tendency to speak in broad generalities, and when these broad generalities come into policy, atrocity can happen because guess what? We don't see the material consequences of it. We simply see this abstract idea of this nation being punished, but it goes deeper. So let's break it down. So since we have established that the general idea of a nation cannot account for an action against a nation, because a nation is simply more than a government. A nation is, of course, a government, culture, people, and a bunch of other things that come together to make a nation. A nation is not simply one thing, it's a variety of things. So, why exactly are these sanctions so bad? Are they bad because they negatively affect people? Well, yes, but also no. The negative effects are a downstream consequence of an immoral decision. These sanctions are bad because they violate principle, and that is, these sanctions violate several principles actually. The sanctions are unjust. They violate the principle of justice. How so? My friends, it's very hard to enact justice on an international level because justice is a personal quality, a personal action. I can be just or unjust towards my fellow human being. And the justification for what justice is flows actually from the nature of man. It was Hugo Grotius, who's sitting right here, right next to me. Hi, Hugo, how you doing? He said in the preliminary discourse of his major work on the rights of war and peace, he said that justice simply consists of allowing others to keep in quiet possession what they have, also giving them in strictness what they may demand. Now, this simply means two things, my friends. Allowing me to keep what I have and preserving my ability to keep what I have is not an interventionist thing. It's simply you letting me be. And what exactly do I have? Well, I have naturally in my possession my freedom. By the virtue of me being a human being, I am a free entity. The Russian people, the Chinese people, American people, they are all free by their very nature. Now, unfortunately, the Russian people and the Chinese people exist under totalitarian dictatorships that are sapping their energy, sapping their creativity, and restricting them for vile political ends. But keep walking with me here. So if justice consists in allowing me to keep in quiet possession what I already have by virtue of my nature as a human being, then how in the world can you justly deprive me of my ability to travel to any nation I want to travel to on an aircraft? How in the world can you justly deprive me of my ability to trade with other kind of people who have a variety of different products when I want to? How in the world can you justly deprive me of my ability to have a certain kind of product in my country, i.e. oil, and buy from them if I want to? How in the world can you deprive me of these things when all of them are simply an outgrowth of my inherent ability to choose, my inherent capacity to choose, which the natural law theorists termed liberty? So how in the world can you justly do this when you're violating what I have already in my possession? The problem is not that we're getting something to the Russian people. The problem is we are basically taking away something from their capacity to be able to choose. We're trying to take away the capacity to choose to punish someone who they don't have any relationship to except by proximity. This is the second principle we're violating. Justice, just like it cannot be broad, is also very, again, specific. So, Putin himself can orchestrate injustice through his armies or through his tactics, right? But we can't apply that injustice to people who are simply close to it. especially if those people had no actual interaction with the injustice in question. It'd be like pointing at me and saying, hey, a family member of yours robbed a bank, you're their kin, therefore you're going into jail, buddy. How does that make any sense? It does not. It's a fundamentally absurd statement. But that's precisely what the United States government, with the EU, with the UK, with Switzerland, with Germany, France, all these places, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying that since you exist in this area, and since this guy who is near you is doing these things, I'm going to also punish you. It completely forgoes any idea of justice. But here's another thing as well. Here's another thing. It doesn't only punish the Russian people. These sanctions also punish Americans, Switzerland, and people who are in every country, but especially Americans. And so many Americans are realizing this because so many Americans, if they want to do any kind of business in Russia, they're essentially frozen out now. If they want to do any kind of trade in Russia, they're frozen out now. If they want to send anything to Russia, they're frozen out now. Americans themselves are cut at the knees from doing anything with any people in Russia, even if those people had nothing to do with any of this conflict. And also Americans are cut at the knees because, again, the supply chain, the oil supply are now limited because companies have had to pull out of Russia to economize and cut costs, which among many other things, has led to a rise in gas prices. So not only are the Russians being punished, but Americans are being punished again for a conflict that they had no idea they were going to get into and they had nothing to do with. But once again, these absurdities become very easy to justify when you don't treat people as concrete individuals, when you instead treat them as part of a broad hive mind. And it's a concerning and it's a problem. The truth is, my friends, punishing people who had no party to this, punishing people and violating the principle of justice and ignoring the individual will not help anything in Ukraine. All it will do is enrage an already mad dictator, and all it will do is normalize the false philosophy of the ends justify the means. No and hell no. The means, my friends, compromise the ends. You cannot have a moral end flow from evil means. You cannot take away my ability to trade, travel, and live, and try to impair it without just cause, and then say that at the end of that, there's going to be something good that comes out of it. No, that's not how it works. If a tree is poisoned, its fruit shall also be poisoned as well. Yet, we live in a world where we can justify things by approximation. We live in a world where we can justify things by appealing to broad general ideas and not having to check our premises and evaluate our presuppositions. We live in a world where these dangerous mentalities intersect with government power and can cause these kind of things to happen under the guise of virtue. Well, I say no longer. The Russian people have done nothing wrong. The American people have done nothing wrong. None of the people who are harmed by these sanctions have done anything wrong, perhaps except the oligarchs and Putin, but those are very particular people. They're not the entire populations of these countries. Also probably worth noting that the oligarchs and Putin, both of the classes of people who have been sanctioned, can easily move their assets or have moved their assets away from being able to be seized, because one of the biggest sanctions on the oligarchs of Putin is that their assets, like their physical assets, like yachts and villas, can be seized and then reappropriated for the funds or the treasuries of the country seizing them. But Putin actually moved his yacht, a nice luxurious yacht, from Germany to Kaliningrad. I'm probably saying that wrong. 2 weeks before he launched an invasion, and some oligarchs have managed to get their multi-billion-dollar yachts away from areas where they could be seized. Some of them have gotten seized, of course, but some of them have not. Point is this: these people in power, the oligarchs and Putin, can evade sanctions and they can duck and hide. It may hurt them, yes, but compared to the people in Russia who are middle class or who are poor or who don't have any multi-million-dollar assets and are simply at the mercy of whatever sanctions and whatever industries get sanctioned, they don't have the power to do that. So even on a practical level, how do you justify these sanctions? You really can't. You really can't. Not only can you can't justify them on a practical level, you can't justify them on a moral level either. And if we want to actually not create more wrongs out of an already very precarious situation, we ought to acknowledge the very simple truth that justice is interpersonal. It does not happen on a broader scale, and these sanctions do nothing more but engage in injustice and almost prevent us from correcting that by taking justice from the personal to the impersonal and blowing it up on a level that many of us cannot engage on. My friends, we have to speak out. Two wrongs do not make a right. Putin can be bad, but attacking people who have nothing to do with him can also be bad as well. And the moment we recognize that is the moment moral consistency comes in, and the moment we can actually address these issues in a productive way. Think about it, my friends. As always, my friends, if you want to support me, please donate to my Patreon if you want to. Patreon.com/PhilCWatson. Or my PayPal, which is going to be my email, which is going to be officialcwatson@gmail.com. Or my locals, which is going to be also the link down below, the comment section down below. Or join my Discord as well. We have a growing community on Discord. I'm very excited for so many of you who show up. I appreciate it. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your love. My friends, as always, I want you to please stay pensive. Bye, guys.